A healthy hoof is first and foremost a hoof without an iron shoe nailed to it. I know that this is provoking to many.
I love that you say, my philosophy is that the horses did not choose this life with us. We chose it for them. So therefore you have a responsibility.
If the hoof is not balanced correctly, so if the horse is walking on a hoof that is not in balance, that will cause stress, of course, on the whole system as well, and that can produce stress rings also. But riding a horse that you have a connection with is just a completely different experience.
What inspired you to name your ethos, your business, your venture, Rebel Horse Care? What does a healthy hoof actually look like? And what can we learn from wild Mustangs to help our domesticated horses and their feet? Louise Backholler, the founder of Rebel Horse Care, certified as a natural hoof care professional in 2008. Louise helps horses and their owners follow the wild horse model and designs healthy horse environments. Louise finds the traditional horse world too harsh and has found her own way through being gentle. We talk about kindness, remembering to breathe, and how every aspect of horse care comes back to connection. Louise, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
First of all, take us back, Louise, to when you first fell in love with horses, but not only that, when you fell in love with the horse hoof as well.
Right. Okay. So fell in love with horses. I'm not sure I can remember that because that was when I was a little child. So I started riding horses at a riding school. I think I must have been 6 or 7 years old. So I think it was like a normal story of a little girl asking her parents, "Can I please ride horses?" I think that's how it went. And then they said, "Okay, sure." So I did that and was in the traditional horse world for many years. Normal riding schools, yeah. And then in my, I think, late teenage years, early 20s maybe, I started kind of looking into a different kind of training, more horsemanship based. I wanted something nicer, kinder to the horse, so I went in that direction. And then naturally, I stumbled across natural hoof care. So, and I think I had a friend that introduced me to a book or something like that, and then started reading about it. Yeah, and then I just was completely, just from the beginning, when I read one of Jamie Jackson's books was one of the first ones, and I was just blown away. I was like, this is so cool. I need to learn more about this. So I think.
What do you think it was, Louise, that you were so fascinated about the hoof? Because there's lots of different aspects of horses that we can all become obsessed with, but why do you think it was the hoof that made you the most curious?
I think up until then I had horses of my own also for several years. So I had my own horses, and I think it was just kind of this part of the horse's body that I didn't really know anything about. And I just had a farrier come shoe some of my horses and trim some of my horses, and they had some problems sometimes, and there were things that didn't work completely the way they should. And then I think I was already interested in kind of more of a natural, like the horse's natural world, and where do they come from, and why do we keep them the way we do, and all of this. And then it just felt like a natural continuation of that, I think. And then once I started reading about the hooves, I was just, I don't know, mesmerized. Just, oh, wow, this is amazing. A whole new universe that opened up for me. So,
and talk us through, what is natural hoof care?
Right. So natural hoof care is many things, actually, because there are many different schools that teach different things. within natural hoof care. So what I can talk about is what I have learned and what I have studied and what I have done and taught myself and what I work with. So I studied with Jamie Jackson. And I think the people that know about natural hoof care will know who he is. He's really one of the founders of what we call natural hoof care. So he went into wild horse country in America and studied Mustangs in the 80s. And he created something that he calls the wild horse model and the wild hoof model based on those studies. And so what it is a whole philosophy that really is as much about the horses and their lifestyle as it is about the hooves themselves. So it matters the environment we create for the horses to live in. It matters how we feed them. Are there stress factors in their life, and how we train, how we ride? So all of these things. So it's really a very holistic approach to hoof care. And then it is about mimicking the wear patterns that we see in these wild Mustangs, how they wear their hooves. And we use them as a model because they are healthy and sound. It wouldn't make much sense to use horses as a model that weren't sound and healthy. So, but they are, and very sound. They run across stones and rocks and gravel, and that is not something that we see many domesticated horses can do, really. So it's really about why is that, and what can we change in the horse's lifestyle, and how can we trim the hoofs to get closer to that. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much to unpick here, isn't there, Louise? I've got to first ask you the question you've just asked us all, which is, why is that? Why is it that our domesticated horses actually struggle to clamber across, hard surfaces, rocks and stones, but wild Mustangs can?
Right. So I personally believe that the biggest issue here is the maintenance, like the living environment that we give them. A lot of people will say genetics play a big role in it. I think that genetics play a part of it, but I think it's much less than we think. I think I think that we generally say that it's the genes and no, but I don't really think so, because I do see horses of all breeds, all ages, all kinds become better when we give them a different kind of living environment. So the movement is one of the big things. Most domesticated horses, they just don't move enough. They don't get sufficient movement. And the movement that they get will often be maybe on a soft surface. So they're out on a grass paddock, little bit soft, maybe even muddy also, and they sink in, and they just don't get the wear that the hoofs need to really build strength. So that's one part. The diet is really big also. Many horses, they just get too much sugar, not enough fiber, all of these things. So it's really important. And then we have the iron shoes, the whole iron shoe thing. So once a horse has had iron shoes on, we take them off. They need to go through a healing period to strengthen the hooves again. So that also plays a role. If you just pull the iron shoes off, you're going to have most likely a sensitive horse for a while anyway. So I'll say the biggest thing is management, how we keep them. And
it's interesting, isn't it? Because we often look at our management for our horses' health in a whole variety of spheres, and we often think about that in terms of their mental health. Are they happy? Are they misbehaving? Are they telling us that they're unhappy? Or are they, content with the movement? Have we got their regime sorted? Are they relaxed in the field? Have they got enough turnout?
Right.
But rarely do we see that through the filter of our horses' hooves. So when you design, and I know that you do design specific plans, Louise, for horse owners who are trying to improve their horses' hooves, how do you design the perfect environment for the horse's hooves?
Right. So the perfect environment, I'm not sure I can design.
It's so difficult, isn't it?
But what we can do is we can try to design something that is closer to the horse's natural world, so what they would be living in nature. And we do use the Mustangs as a model. There are other wild horses in the world, but specifically these animals are healthy. So what Jamie Jackson also did was he wrote a book called Paddock Paradise, A Guide to Natural Horseboarding. So he kind of was the one that invented the track systems. So a track system, I don't believe that it is the only way to keep horses with healthy hooves and happy and healthy, but it is a very good design because we don't need to have crazy big amounts of land for it to work. And most people do not have huge amounts of land. So what I think is genius about a track system is that it's really about the creativity and how we design it. So instead of having one big open field, we will make track for the horses. So the horses move along track. So with fencing, we'll make tracks through the landscape so the horses get more movement. So they can't just walk from A to B, from the food to the water, and then fall asleep. They kind of have to move all day long, all day and night long after their food, along tracks and with feeding stations spread out around the system. Yeah, so there's different things we can do, and we can make surfaces for them to walk over, sand, gravel, things like that stimulates the hooves. So it's a whole different way of designing a horse paddock that really kind of in a fairly small space we can try to mimic the natural world. So that's what it's about.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you can create within that track, and hopefully those listening and watching on YouTube to this conversation know what we mean by a track system, which is that either a circular formation or sometimes people's tracks kind of weave across different fields in a track-like system where they move and they weave, and it encourages them to run and to walk and to trek and move for their food and their water and to not stand still and just lope about, which is obviously what some horses do within that box field system. But it's also very difficult to find landowners, if you have to rent or if you have to put your horse in a livery yard, that will actually agree to this, because although it's a brilliant way of managing the land, and actually I've known many people that set up track systems who actually combine it with nature as well, and different types of grasses and foraging and hedgerows, and they have a section for the birds and the long grasses for the wildlife. And it's fascinating, and it works across spheres, it works across nature and with wildlife too. But landowners are often against them because of the different surfaces. It either churns up the ground and it's muddy and people don't like poaching, or they don't like you to lay down the different wood chip or sand or whatever it might be. And myself, as someone with my mum, we have to rent land with landowners, and it's a real heartbreaking moment. And we've been in the situation with a few of our landowners that we've been with over the years where they will just put their foot down and say no. Yeah. Even though it's the best way forward for the horses. Yeah. And it is heartbreaking. What do you do, Louise, when people and horse owners don't have those kind of options at their fingertips? How can we even begin to mimic the life of a wild Mustang for our own horses?
Well, I would say that one thing that you can do, even if you don't have a track system, is hang up hay nets, for instance. I can't imagine anyone not wanting you to do, well, maybe, but I mean, that should be something that you could be allowed to do if you do it yourself and it's not on someone else's schedule to do it. So instead of feeding your horses in one spot, just putting the hay in hay nets, hanging them around trees, if there's trees, or on the fencing, whatever, just that will create more movement in the horses. Keep the water at a distance from where you hang the hay nets, so they have to walk back and forth from the hay to the water. Things like that. And even if you're not allowed to build a whole track, if you're allowed to just set up some fencing, maybe make a horseshoe, or something, anything that can kind of motivate the horses to have to move around that fencing. Or it could be logs or something. So you don't have to put up a lot of fencing. You don't have to put down a lot of surfacing either. It's really, the movement really is the biggest thing. The movement after forage, I would say, is absolutely number one. So if you can do that, you've done something. So make it
They
interesting.
sound like brilliant ideas, because they are things that we all have control over: where we put our fencing, where we scatter our hay, and our water supply, and things like salt licks and kick around balls and things like that.
Exactly.
So then it gives us the feeling of having a bit more power again, when we feel so helpless often, don't we, when we are at the mercy of the landowner or the livery owner. And of course, do what I do, which is I'm always on the hunt, talking to people to see whether they would have land that you can rent and set up a track system. It is about communication, isn't it, with people in your local area. So there is always that hope that the situation might change. And Louise, do you find people... Do you find people come to you, Louise, for hope and to kind of say, I'm in a desperate situation, I want to make changes, can you help us through?
I think that I don't get contacted by many people that come to me with that problem, but I run into it with people that when I go to trim the horses' hooves. It's more that way around. So when I get called out to trim, and I come to trim the hooves of a client's horses, and then I start asking questions. I'm the annoying one. So how's your horse living, and what do you feed, and what, all these things, because it has an impact on the horse's hooves, and we cannot just focus on the hoof care alone. We just cannot. It's all connected. So it's often that way around, and then I do my best to help horses and the owners in the situation that they're in, because that's what we can do. And I think that just little changes is a victory. Every time that people do a little thing, like having a horse living alone, that's very normal here in Spain. A lot of horses live alone, sadly. So just, people getting a friend for that horse, or figuring out that they can board them with someone else so they get a friend, and, little things like that help. So
why is that, Louise?
Big things also with movement, because horses that live together move more. Yeah.
And why is that, Louise? Really interesting that in Spain the horses are kept alone. Why is that?
I think old tradition probably is part of it. Like having space, and then some malconceptions that people think that, well, if we keep them together, they're going to hurt each other. All of this, I think that there's a lot of that, and I think it's not only here. I think it's many places in the world. People think that if we turn out the horses together, they're going to get injured and all of this, and then they're in these little tiny, one horse in each tiny little paddock. We see that a lot here in Spain, and so it's hard to get people to understand, because many of those places could, instead of having all these little tiny paddocks, they could open it up, make a beautiful track system, or two or three if all the horses cannot be together, and then so it's really a way of thinking differently. You wouldn't necessarily need more space. It's really a case of being creative with what you have and thinking differently.
When you go out and you trim horses' hooves, and if there is a situation where horses are in separate paddocks, do you try and communicate and educate and get the message through?
I do with the owners that I work for, yes. I don't often do with the owners of the place, because I don't really think it's a battle that I can, it's a battle I'm going to lose, and it's going to drain me. It's going to drain me and suck my energy that I could use doing good things. So that's kind of how I choose my battles. But I have helped some people find other places for their horses, just simply move them to a different livery place where they have better management for the horses. So yeah.
And Louise, when you go out and you're looking at the hoof, take us back to basics. In your eyes, what does a healthy hoof look like?
Okay, so in my opinion, a healthy hoof is first and foremost a hoof without an iron shoe nailed to it. I know that this is provoking to many, but this is how I see it. A healthy hoof is short and wide, so it provides good foundation for the horse. It has a short toe. It has a low heel, so it's far back underneath the horse, not running forward away from the horse, back underneath the bones and the horse supporting the horse where it's supposed to. It is a hoof without what we call stress rings. Some people call them event lines. So there are these growth rings that we can see running horizontally over the hoof wall.
Oh,
We don't
yes.
really want to see many of those because it means that the system is stressed. If you look underneath at the solar view of the hoof, a healthy hoof will have a fairly thick hoof wall. It will have a tight white line, if people know what the white line is. So the white line is it's between the sole and the hoof wall is a little line that is actually not white. It's called the white line. It's a bit confusing, but it's actually yellow, kind of
Oh,
yellow, grayish in color when it's healthy. It's one of those. So it will have a tight, strong white line. It will have a healthy, strong frog. So there are things that we can see in a hoof that will show us if the hoof is healthy or if there's something going on. And this is also things that I can talk with the horse owners about. So if I see things, I can say, so how's the diet? Your horse has maybe some low grade laminitis, or there can be different things. Yeah.
and when you talk about those stress lines, that's really interesting. It's something I've definitely seen in my time with
Uh-huh.
horses, but not really registered as to what it is. When you say it's when the hoof is under stress, what kind of stress are you talking about? Is it sort of a hammering on hard ground? Is it too much work? What sort of stress?
No, it will usually be, it can be mental stress actually. Mental
Oh,
stress can give stress lines in the hooves, but I would say the
oh,
most normal cause will be diet related things. Yeah. Too much sugar in the diet, not enough fiber,
mm.
too many calories, and or if the hoof is not balanced correctly. So if the horse is walking on a hoof that is not in balance, that will cause stress, of course, on the whole system as well, and that can produce stress rings also. So
And is there any?
sorry,
Sorry, Louise, you carry on.
so if the chorea, we call it the chorea inside the hoof, it's the part that produces all the horn that we look at. When we look at the hoof, we see what we call the hoof capsule. So the whole hoof capsule is produced by different chorea inside the hoof. And if they get stressed for different reason, and that can be uneven loading, unbalanced loading, then they will produce these little stress rings. So it's a stress reaction from the chorea. So diet, mental stress. You can also see it from a wormer. You give your horse a dewormer, then they might just produce
Oh,
one of those, and you can see it growing down the whole hoof wall, and then eventually disappear or be worn away.
oh.
Vaccinations also. So anything that can stress the system, really.
Gosh, that's so interesting. And of course, it can be reversed as
Yeah,
long as you make the changes and then it grows out.
exactly. Yeah.
And what problems are you increasingly seeing, Louise, when you go out to treat your clients in hooves and in horses at the moment?
I would say generally what we call subclinical laminitis, that is really a big
Mm.
thing, much bigger than most people think. um, so low grade subclinical laminitis. So it's not when we talk about laminitis, people will usually picture a horse that's really ill and really sore and sensitive and not wanting to move, and that's kind of an extreme. That's later in the process, but way before that happens, we see things in the hooves, signs in the hooves. So all these little things, I see a lot of that. So it can be thrush in the frogs, it can be like black spots on the white line, red spots on the white line, the stress rings on the outside of the hoof, things like that. and then maybe a little bit of sensitivity. People will say, my horse is a little bit sensitive. Well, what has happened? Has something changed? They were put out on grass last week. Okay, so that's probably,
Yeah.
so those are the most common things, I will say. Diet related, and yeah, the lack of movement. So they cannot build the strength because they don't move enough and on too soft surfaces. Yeah.
There's an incredible amount of challenges, isn't there, now for horse owners in terms of trying to keep horses in the most natural way when there is less and less land year on year. And actually, here in the UK, I'm not sure how it is in Spain, but here in England, in this particular corner of England, we are finding that even our hay is far too sugary, and we have to soak our hay every day because otherwise our miniatures get exactly what you're describing, that very early signs of laminitis where they're just a bit sensitive, and we're thinking, why? They're moving, they're on low sugar everything, they get turnout, but it's in mud paddocks, all in muddy sort of areas. Why? Oh, it's the hay. And now we're battling against our sugary hay. We've gone to our hay provider. We've asked for the coarsest, lowest sugar hay possible. He's guaranteed it. And even that's come back far too sugary. And we're soaking that every day. And it just feels like a constant battle. Do you think we have to just keep being curious and keep looking for new options as to how we can keep our horses more naturally and manage all of these challenges?
Yes, I do think so. And I think one of the really big things is getting them moving, because if the horses get more movement, then they can tolerate a little bit more. I would say the biggest thing is get them moving, get the horses moving, because this is really, the lack of movement is a big deal. And the less movement they get, the more concerned we have to be about the feeding. So if we can get the horses moving more, and I know that that is a difficult one, but that's really number one. And then if you know that you have a hard time getting hay that's low enough in sugar, you can look at what else is the horse eating. So if the horse is also on grass, for example, does it have access to short, bitten down, stressed grass that contains a lot of sugar? Maybe you can do something about that. What else do you feed your horse? Does it get supplements that has sugar in it? So we can. There are different things that we can. We can make a change then maybe to the other things that we're feeding the horse. Because if we give the horse sugary grass, sugary hay, and muesli with molasses, then that might be too much for that horse's system to take. But if we can then cut down on the grass, we can cut down on the other things and just feed a simple vitamin mineral balancer and hay and get the horse moving, then maybe it will be okay to feed the hay that has a little bit more sugar.
That's a really inspiring message, because I'm sure I'm not the only horse owner that feels almost a bit scared to, unsoak their hay, or a bit scared about what they're eating. Can they have this particular foraging treat that's low sugar, or is that still too much? But actually, it's really reassuring to know that actually if we can step up their movement, their exercise, if we can take them out on a few more in-hand hacks, because that's what we do. We like to take them out into the countryside where we can't have them on a track system. We take them out for walks. If we do that, then actually there will be room for a little bit more forage and a little bit more sugar, which is reassuring to know.
Yeah.
Louise, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your philosophy, because I read some online and I just was totally moved by what you had to say, and it really resonated with me about your philosophy working alongside horses.
So you mean with the training, or
yeah, when you say, and I will sort of quote it back at you, Louise. I love that you say, my philosophy is that the horses did not choose this life with us. We chose it for them. So therefore you have a responsibility.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So once again, I think that everything is connected. I think that we cannot just focus on one part of the horse's life. And that be the hoofs or the training or the riding. And I think that it's something that we tend to do a lot as humans. We tend to focus on only one thing and then kind of forget about the rest, and everything is connected. So we're not going to have a happy horse if we don't provide them with a proper lifestyle, right? And if we then do that and then we focus on the training, I think that I mean we're having horses for pleasure these days, at least in our part of the world. We don't need them to help win wars or plow our fields anymore. It's not a matter of survival. It really is for pleasure. But it seems to me often when I look out in the world and teach students also, and that we're still kind of stuck in this picture that horses are for riding and that's it, and if I can't ride my horse, then it's really not worth anything. Or it sounds a bit harsh, but it's kind of, I feel that it's a little bit like that, and we need to change that outlook. The horses, it's not, they're just horses, and we're the ones that choose to have them as our companions or pets or riding animals, whatever we want to call it. And so it really is our responsibility to figure out how do these animals, how does their psychology work, how do they communicate, what do they like, what do they need, and how can we build a connection with them. And maybe the connection should be more important than can I ride my horse and how quickly can I ride my horse, and yeah. So I think it's really, I think we need to change the way we view it. Yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because every other animal that we have as humans in a domesticated sense, we give them that pet status, our dogs, our cats, our rabbits. No one's worried about the job they may have. No one goes out to buy a dog for a job these days.
No.
It is for a companion, for a friend, a family member that's going to be loved and adored, whatever happens to that dog. Same for cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, and everything else that comes into our family life. Horses have still, in 2025, got to have that purpose. They're bought for a reason, whether it's to ride or to drive, whether they're jumping or they're doing endurance or they're eventing. There's always a plan earmarked out for them, isn't there, and a destiny when they reach their new home. And it's something that has always mystified me, that then people are able to move them on when they've finished their time with their horse at that particular moment, and then move on to a smarter model or a more advanced model. And no one, if we did that to our dogs, there would be outrage, wouldn't there? Exactly. Absolute outrage in our society, and yet it's totally normal for horses. And I get why perhaps in the past that's been the case, but why do you think, Louise, this is still an issue we are facing in 2025?
Yeah, I ask myself that all the time. I'm not sure I have an answer for it. I think part of it is because we're still I think it takes a long, long time to change traditions and traditional thinking, and maybe we're still stuck in this pattern of horses are working animals, and so even though we use them in quotation signs as for competitions and stuff, there's still that thing, I think, kind of stuck in our minds, that they're supposed to work, and maybe also because they're expensive. People spend a lot of money on horses. It's expensive to own a horse, and it costs more than it does to own a cat or a dog, right? It's an expensive animal. There's lots of things that we have to pay for. We have to pay for the vet. We have to pay for the farrier. The food is expensive. The boarding is expensive. They're large animals. So I think that many people see it as, well, I pay all this money, so you have to give me something back. I think that's in the back of the mind of a lot of people, that I make sure that you get the food you need and all these things. I pay for your farrier, so you have to give me something back. And I think that if we could help humans change that mindset, that would be really, really beneficial, not just for the horses, but for us as well. Because who says that it's better to go for a ride on your horse than it is to sit in the paddock and just be close to them. You know, who
Mm.
says it's better to, I don't know, win a competition than to have a connection with your horse where they choose to come up to you and spend time with you. So I think that we would benefit from changing that mindset as well as the horses would. But I don't know. It takes a lot of time, and then we
Mm.
also have a lot of pressure on us, right? I mean, there's a lot of pressure on everybody. Everybody's stressed out. There's a lot of pressure. We have to look good. We have to have success. We have to all these things. We have to show on social media what we can do, what we can achieve with our horses. And I think it
Mm.
puts a lot of pressure on people who are maybe new in the horse world, people who come into the horse world with a dream of connection and partnership, because I think a lot of humans actually that is what they want. Deepest down inside, I think that's what most of us want, is the connection. But then all these things happen, and we see all of this stuff out there and hear all of this, and then I don't know, we just get veered off that. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's like you say, it's that still that mindset of some people that own horses, and then it's also even non-horsey people
Yeah,
believe this, and they are not
exactly.
people who have ridden or have looked after horses or have had anything to do with horses. And you can hear the tone in my voice change because me and Mum have a little we have a little herd of rescue horses, and
Right.
none of them are ridden, so we know that joy of going out and grooming them and walking them out in hand. And I, like you, fell in love with horses and ponies as a child and became obsessed with riding. And then secondary, it was the groundwork. And along the years, I fell in love with being with horses on the ground and realised, actually, this is what it's about.
Hmm.
Even though I love riding, and obviously I still love riding, but it's really about that connection and about that relationship with the horse and how mind-blowing that can be and what can be achieved on the ground. But we will have people walking by the fields who are just dog walkers, and they will crane their necks over the fence and shout, "Why aren't you riding that horse? I've walked past this field 3 times this week and you're not riding them." And I think, who are you? Go away and walk your dog. Who are you? Go away.
Yeah.
And equally, we will walk the horses out and get peculiar looks. It will, I do enjoy talking to people who stop us, but they will kind of say, "Why are you walking this horse?"
Exactly.
As if there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of trying to change people's mindset, saying, well, actually, the horses love it and it's their relaxing time. And it's our time to just walk and talk and to watch nature around us and to look in the hedgerows and breathe and just calm down. Whereas actually, when you're riding, as much as that is a whole nother pleasure that
Mhm.
obviously I still love hacking and still love riding, but you're still asking the horse to work, aren't you? You're still asking the horse to carry you, and you're still
Mhm.
having to make sure that you are riding correctly. And actually, the two of you walking along, there's no pressure on either of us
Right.
as we walk along.
Yeah. It's a completely different. Yeah, it is very different. But I have had the same experiences. I have had people. I walk with my horses also because I enjoy it and I get
Yeah,
exercise as well. And I think it's a
yeah.
beautiful way to be with them. But if someone walks by, you can be sure they're going to stop and say, "Why are you not riding?" So it really is deeply ingrained in society that horses are for riding. Um, and it's difficult to change, and it puts a lot of pressure on people. It does for sure. But I mean, we have to. I guess those of us that choose differently, we have to keep talking about it, keep spreading the message, keep educating, um, so that it becomes more normal that we can enjoy horses in a different way and have a connection with them. And I mean, riding, we all love riding. Of course we do. It's beautiful and it's lovely. But riding a horse that you have a connection with is just a completely different experience. So I think that maybe should be the goal, and that we take the time it takes to get to that with a horse and not speed up. We rush. We need to get on their backs as soon as possible, but build a connection, and have a bond with your horse before you start riding, and then it'll be a completely different experience. And we will not need to use all the hard tack either, because we'll have a connection with the horse. So
And that both can coexist. I think some think that actually if you're in hand hacking and you're doing lots of groundwork and there is that focus on the connection on the ground, that you're against riding. But that's just not the case, is
no,
it? The two can play and
absolutely,
intertwine in harmony.
absolutely, of course it can. Yeah, for sure there are some people that take it more to the extreme and say I don't want to ride at all, and I respect that completely. I think that that's, that's a choice. But I don't think it has to be that way. I think we can absolutely ride horses in a way that the horses enjoy it as well, for sure. And then part of that also is, as you also mentioned, that riding in a way that so that it's good for the horse's body, that we're not breaking down the horse's body, because when we put a rider's weight on their back, it does affect them and affect
Mm,
the way they move, etc. So we have to learn about that also. We have to learn about biomechanics and how does horses move and how can we ask them to use their muscles in a different way and build them up. But I think that our whole mindset needs to change, really, around horses. There's so much. I mean, they're so misunderstood animals, really.
mm.
Yeah.
It's such a shame, isn't it? I mean, we're starting to see a shift in conversations now, but how long do you think it's going to take for people to change from that and maybe leave behind that traditional view that you've talked about, Louise, and maybe leave behind that sort of traditional method? How long do you think it will take, or do you think there'll always be a stream of traditional people that have been passed down the generations, the thought processes?
I don't know. That's a hard one to answer.
Mm,
I think there will be. I think with change of generations, of course, it will change.
mm,
But yes, there will be a part of the equestrian world that will still be traditional. I think for many many years, and maybe that part of the equestrian world will become smaller and smaller. Where right now it's very big, and it's kind of a small group of people that do different things differently, and hopefully we will see a change where it kind of changes so
yeah,
the those of us that do things differently and more with the horse's perspective in mind, that will spread and become bigger and take over, and then it will be a smaller group that does things traditionally, and then at some point I guess it'll have to die out. you know Hopefully, let's see.
and Louise, you hold sort of private workshops and have certain clients where you work on training and connection. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, so if I when I have a new client with a new horse, it doesn't really matter where they are in their journey, if they're riding or if they're at some level, or whatever in riding. I will want to see them communicating on the ground first of all. So I always start with people on the ground, and basically ask them to just do leading work with the horse. That's usually where I will start with anybody, really, and it's something I do myself a lot. And still with my horses that I can do other things with, I still go back to this basics, because leading a horse is, I find, where all the communication really starts. Unless it's a horse that has a lot of problems and maybe is dangerous to be next to, then we will need to do some free work where the horse is not that close to us. But for most horses, leading work is where I would start, because um, many people are not aware of their body language when they communicate with
Mm,
horse. They're not aware of their own emotional state, their energy, what they're kind of sending out. Um, am I present with my horse? Am I stressed out thinking about other things, thinking about what I need to do tomorrow, or what happened at work today, or whatever it might be? Am I present? Am I here? And can I communicate with my horse with as little bodily movement as possible, for instance, something like that. I think a lot of people they're just not aware at all. They never think about that. It's something that we do because we use our body language when we speak with humans as well, but it's something that we do subconsciously. We don't often think about it very much. But with horses, we have to be very aware because we can be quite contradicting. We can say something with our body, but we're actually wanting something else or meaning something else. And then, what is it that you want to achieve? What are you looking for and why? I think that that's a question also that I ask people. Why do you want this from your horse or with your horse? What is it that you're looking for? And try to get them to feel back to that kind of where it all started. Why do what are you looking for? And for most people, it's connection. It really is. But we just, with all the conditioning happening in our lives and all the pressure and all the different voices saying different things and all the different experts saying this and that, we get confused and we kind of lose that, I think. But I think most people have a natural urge to connect and also can do it. I think most of us know what is right and what is wrong to do to another living being, right? But we just kind of lose that sense. So I think I see my biggest job as a teacher to help people find back to that to that connection and to that feeling of where does it all come from and how can we facilitate that, and then teach them about their more technical, of course, also about their body language, about positive, negative reinforcement, and all of these things as well, of course.
Oh, so many things to ask you on this. But first, I find it so interesting, Louise, that you mentioned you start by having the owner leading their horse. Now, how true is it? I mean, me and you are both examples. When we talk about when we first fell in love with horses, we were children and we were riding. And that is most horsey people enter the equestrian world through riding lessons at a school or on a livery yard. So we're taught how to manage a horse in the saddle. Yeah. And then when you go on and you loan a horse or you share a horse or you buy your own, you're a rider. But are you experienced in horse management? Do you know how to look after a horse? And actually, it's really interesting. You then teach best practice on how to lead a horse, how to do groundwork, because often we're having to learn that as we go, aren't we? When we buy our own horses.
Yes, which is, in my opinion, completely backwards and completely wrong. and as a hoof trimmer, also, I can say that many horses have not learned to lift their legs. Horses that are ridden at a certain level and they have never learned to lift their legs, which is absolutely crazy. So all the basic things that a horse needs to learn to have a good life in the world of humans, you could say, right? There are things that they need to learn with us. Many horses have not learned that because all the focus is on riding. So that's, that's what I try to teach things differently. And actually, when you focus on being good at leading work, having a good communication with your horse from the ground, the riding becomes better, nicer also. So everything starts there. It's really about building a strong foundation that you can then build upon. And riding, in my opinion, it's the roof of the house. It's not the foundation, right?
Yeah.
There's so much that comes before that. And I also believe that riding is a privilege. It's not a given, it's not something that we should ever take for granted, that that the horses allow us to sit on their back and carry us around. It's a privilege. So I really do think that it's our responsibility to learn how they communicate. How can we make them feel good about the connection with humans and, all of these things. Yeah.
And I would have loved that as a child if actually there were groundwork lessons as well. I'd have loved to learn how to long rein, how to lunge. And someone asked me the other day, they said, when, you love groundwork, Anna, you're always doing it with your horses. When did you first learn? And I kind of racked my brains and I thought, I don't think I ever did. I think I started getting horses on loan as a teenager. And I think I was given a really super intelligent Arab, but she was slightly nutty and slightly kooky. And she'd throw people off and drag teenagers down the road. And someone just said, oh, could you ride her a few times a week? And can you lunge her a couple of times a week? And I just thought, okay, and sent her out and sort of learnt gung-ho and just got on with it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then it's something that I had to kind of fine tune and learn through watching others over the years and videos. And I had a friend that started backing and breaking stallions, and I'd go and watch her. And it was about me going and seeking that information and being curious and asking the right questions. But actually, that's something that should be offered, in every riding school, shouldn't it?
Yes, I agree. It really should be the first thing we teach children when they start riding at a riding, or adults, people who come into the horse world. It should be the first thing that they have to learn. And I actually had a student the other day. I was teaching a lesson, and she said to me, because we had to go back because something was not really working with their communication. So I said, okay, we go back to leading. I just want you to walk around with your horse in a lead rope, and then we focus on this. And then we worked on that. And she said, well, I understand why people sometimes don't want to do that, because I felt that we had gotten to a certain level, and now I feel we're going backwards, right? But it's just not really about that. It's about communicating with your horse and taking things where they are right here and now, and not seeing it as this level, this, I have to advance up these levels. And once I get to this, I never have to spend time on all those other levels anymore. We all lead our horses every day. If we have horses of our own, right? We lead them to and from the paddock. We lead them, everywhere. So leading a horse is walking with a horse, but it's usually something that is done without really humans thinking about it, and with quite bad communication often. Like the horse is dragging you around or stopping all the time, looking at things and not really wanting to walk, or walking too fast, or, So if we start there, it's something we do with the horses all the time. If we start there and create a good relationship, have a good communication with each other, it makes us as humans be much more aware of our own body, our own emotional state, our ability to stay focused, to be present, to be calm. Then everything else will just come naturally. And then we still go back and look at that again. So every time I take my horse to and from the paddock, I can think about, is this still working? Is this communication still working well? Can I stop? Can I walk forward? Is my horse happy to walk with me? Do they run into me, or are they okay staying beside me? All of that. So yeah, I think it's, instead of seeing it as, well, I don't ever have to go back there, just, it's a foundation for everything else. And it's something that we do all the time. So check in regularly and see, is it still working? Is our connection good? And then your riding is going to be much nicer as well. And your horse is going to be happier, for sure.
And I think it's so important as well when you describe your client saying, oh, I feel we've gone backwards. You wonder if that's coming from an outside voice. Is she worried about what other people are thinking of her achievements with her horse?
I think so, yes. And this particular client is very dedicated and really into it. So I think she was kind of saying it as, I understand, she kind of felt that I understand where this comes from when people say that, And yes, I think it is because of that. I think it's this fear of, I think we seek acknowledgement a lot with our horses and with our achievement with our horses. I've gotten to this level, I can do this, I want to take a picture, I want to make a video so I look good on Instagram, choose the best moment. So I can get acknowledgement from other people. And this is really a big part of the problem. Maybe we need to get away from that a little bit and think about what is important. Is it important to look good and get acknowledgement, or is it important to have a strong bond with your horse and be kind to your horse? Which is what it's really basically about. Creating a connection is being kind, to another living being.
Kindness is underrated, isn't it?
Yes. And the horses give us so much. They give us so much. Right? So, yeah.
And for some people, kindness never has to be taught. I remember thinking, as along with my equestrian friends, we used to say, oh, we're never going to really, boot a horse, or, instructors would say, oh, give it a smack with the whip, and we wouldn't. So, there are choices that we made naturally before the conversation started opening up that we're all having now. However, I really look back and wish that those instructors would talk about kindness and about these horses as personalities, as living animals, that creatures we need to be kind to, rather than the performance and the movement and were we getting this correct in our lessons. Actually, to remember who we are sat on, who we are walking, trotting and cantering, rather than who is the best and you're not doing that on time, and that one needs a good kick on, it's sluggish, and actually talking about kindness and empathy. And I think that's so important, and that's almost a missing link in lessons in traditional setups.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've completely missed that we are working with a living animal, a living, breathing animal with a heart, and emotions, and actually extremely sensitive animal. I think that it seems to be just kind of taken out of the whole equation, right? And that is a problem. We have to get back to that. We have to get back to seeing them as living, breathing animals with very sensitive animals with a heart, with emotions, and be kind and gentle with them and learn how to communicate with them so they want to be with us, and want to work with us. And I think, again, as I said before, I think that most people know how to be kind. I think it's in our nature, most of us, but it's something that we lose, with the course of our lives, and we have to go back and find it again. We really
that's
do.
such an interesting thought, actually, that going back and finding that kindness, that might be sort of hidden as everyone juggles the stresses and strains of life and career and relationships and everything else that's on our plates. Louise, what is one thing we can all do today, whether we are riding our horses, doing groundwork with our horses, as a horse owner, what one thing can we do and add to our sessions or change in our routine that will encourage a strong bond and connection with our horses?
Well, I will say, take a moment to stop and take a deep breath. I think that's the best the best advice I can give. Stop for a moment. Stop what you're doing for a moment. Take a deep breath, or take 3, and just look at your horse and ask yourself, what am I seeing? If I am really, really honest, is my horse feeling good? Is my horse happy with what we're doing together? And if yes, wonderful, continue. If not, think about why that might be. I think that that's the best advice, is actually maybe do less and not, add something else that people can try, but rather maybe take a step back and take a deep breath and, look at your horse and see what it feels like, the energy you get from them.
It seems that not only kindness, that we've forgotten how to breathe over the years as well.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to remember how to breathe. How often
I don't
do
know.
we...
When I teach people, I don't know how many times I say, take a deep breath, stop, take a deep breath. And me as well. I will be standing on the to the side of the arena and stop breathing sometimes. Oh, remember, let's all take a deep breath.
It's so true.
Usually you will see the horse, when we stop and take a deep breath, the horse will do the same thing. And they will say,
You're so
"Oh,
right. I mean,
God,
and
thank
also,
you."
how often when we're with our horses, do we, not only when we're dealing with our own issues, as we've already talked about, whether it's career, relationship, friendship issues, or pressures or commitments that are weighing on our mind, and then it comes out into our relationship with our horse, but also if there's something external. So, if a tractor's roaring past or
Mhm.
someone's emptying the muck heap and, or digging or drilling, and actually, we are almost, obviously our horses can be the first to react, but sometimes we are the ones to first
Yeah,
tense up and think, what's the horse going to do,
yes.
and anticipating a problem
Mhm.
before it's come. So
Yeah,
actually just breathing and just
exactly,
being in the moment, which is a
exactly.
real challenge, isn't it,
It
at
is.
times.
Yeah, and also, see, when you mentioned that thing as a tractor or something, I have a little Arabian as well,
Oh
and
yes.
she is alive.
Yes.
So she's a horse that can be very spooky at times, and I think that what that really can teach us is to not, I have to change my plans often with her, because if it's windy, if there's something going on, she just cannot concentrate, and then I have to change my plan. And instead of seeing that as, oh, I had a bad training today because we didn't go as I have planned, I try to just say, well, then we did something different. That was a great
Mm.
opportunity to practice wind training. Let's just walk around and let's see if we can find a little bit of peace. And let's go over and look at that tarp
Oh,
flapping in the wind and get a treat. And then the training is just about something else. And we're both still learning something instead of seeing it as failure.
yeah.
It's just something else. That was just a different training we had that day, or a different time spent together.
Changing our mindset.
Yeah. Hmm.
Louise, before you go, I've got to ask you. I thought there must be a story behind Louise's business name, Rebel Horse Care. What inspired you to name your ethos, your business, your venture, Rebel Horse Care?
Yeah, well, there actually isn't one particular story behind it. It was just, I think I spent a long time trying to figure out what I wanted to call my business, and then I ended up with that because I do feel like a rebel often, in a positive way, you know, um, because I kind of tend to go against the stream and go the opposite direction of everyone else, and that's what I felt, at least for most of the years I've been around horses. And then I think I just thought to myself, why not turn that into a positive thing for myself as well? So every time I see that name, it kind of inspires me to keep going. When I see my name, I see I'm the rebel. Okay, I have to keep going. I have to work on this. I have to keep talking to people and try to change their minds and help them, find better ways for horses. So yeah, so that's all there is to it. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's inspired. And I love that it's almost, it's given you that title that you have to
Yeah.
then live up to. What a brilliant motivation every
Yeah.
single day
Yeah.
working with
Exactly.
horses and facing the equestrian world. Because, of course, as we've talked throughout the episode, it is difficult, isn't it? Going against the grain and dealing with people in the industry. They're not always, as we've mentioned, kind or encouraging or supportive. And we need our armour, don't we?
Yeah. Absolutely. You have to be quite strong, I think. But also, I think the most important thing is to know who you are and be true to that. I think that's taken me a long time, not to find out who I was, I think, but maybe to be, to stick to that, to stand my ground and say, well, this is how I feel, this is what I do, this is how I work with horses, this is how I see it, and dare speak it. But this is what I am. So as long as I am honest, you know, then, well, it is what it is. People can take it for what it is, and hopefully I can help. I'm out there trying to help people, trying to help their horses. And whenever I feel that people have the heart in the right place, then I'm there to help, you know. And it doesn't really matter what the circumstances are, as long as I feel that they are wanting to do the best for the horses. Then, yeah, I'm there to, support.
Louise, thank you so much for coming on Curious Equestrian, and thank you so much for sharing your mission with us today. It has been so inspiring and eye-opening and motivating as well. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who says, actually, I can't wait to go out now and just breathe with my horse and take the pressure off and just relax together and see what happens organically and naturally. So thank you. For those listening, Louise, who want to get in touch, who want to find out more about you, how can they find you?
So I have a website that's called rebelhorsecare.eu. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Rebel Horse Care. And on my website, you'll find my contact information. Yeah.
Louise, thank you so much for our chat today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram @Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.